All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and I actually meant to get this out yesterday, but I was too busy watching Super Tuesday results and looking at that. And a lot of things have actually happened since Monday. First thing that happened was Bloomberg dropped, which I am very, 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 very happy about. Also, forget the T-shirt. It's laundry day for me. So anyway, um, yeah, and of course, as we all remember, Klobuchar and Buttigieg, they they dropped over the weekend after Biden's win in South Carolina. And Biden definitely looks to be the front runner for the Democratic nomination again. And I don't think Bernie is too happy about this. I'm not going to say that he is potentially a going to run as an independent. I think I would love to see that because I don't think he's ever going to get anything, achieve anything by continuing to run as a Democrat, and his time is kind of limited in terms of running for president. He's going to be what 84 the next cycle, so or and he's going to be in his 80s in the next presidential cycle, and by that point, the Democratic Party is going to have other younger progressives that are going to want to run. They're still going to have Elizabeth Warren. They're still going to have, like I said, other progressives who are capable of running for president, who are going to take up his lane and make it harder for him to win. Um, your Tulsi Gabbard, stuff like that. But today we're going to be talking about a potential Biden versus Trump matchup and talk about where I think there is ground to be made for both Biden and Trump based off of 2016, where they can both expand the map. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take Delaware off the map because Joe Biden will not lose the state he currently lives in, basically his current home state, even though he is originally from Pennsylvania. And I think that's actually going to help him in Pennsylvania. So I would put Pennsylvania is a likely state in his column. And I'm also going to take away states that I would put as likely for Donald Trump, which would be Georgia and Texas. These are two states that Democrats are hoping to flip at some point, but I just don't think it's quite ready to happen at this time. Obviously, things can change, but like I said, I don't think it's quite ready to happen. I'm also going to take New Mexico and put that in the likely Biden column just because, as much as Donald Trump is wanting to expand the map there, I think it's a little bit too much. And we're also going to put Virginia in the likely column because Biden is a moderate. He's going to appeal to establishment voters in Loudoun and Prince William County, as well as run competitively in a place like Virginia Beach, which is a known Republican stronghold. And he's not going to be as hated as, say, a Bloomberg would be in the rural areas because he's not crazy. He is senile, I will give him that, but he's not a bad candidate. Like, he is the safe choice for the Democrats. But now let's move into the states that I think lean one way or another. And we're going to go ahead and start with Minnesota, which I think is a state that he'll be able to hold. Again, Biden does have that Midwestern Rust Belt working class white credibility, but it's not nearly as much as, say, a Donald Trump or a Bernie Sanders has. North Carolina could be interesting because Biden might be able to do better than Clinton did with African American voters who make up the large portion of Democratic votes in the South. But I'm not so sure they can overcome the fact that Republicans have a small built in advantage in North Carolina because I've discussed this before, but North Carolina, Georgia, they're both what I would call turnout based swing states, where really it's about turning out your base and getting your base to vote. North Carolina has a very slight built-in Republican advantage. Georgia has a much more substantial built-in Republican advantage. I think Trump would be able to hold North Carolina, in the lean column, um, and we'll go ahead and also say that he'd be able to hold on to Nebraska's second district. And remember, with these for predictions, the likely lean tilt, that's based off of my confidence in the prediction rather than where I think the vote margin will be. Okay. Iowa, I think Trump would probably hold it. Similar thing with Ohio, and actually I think I'm going to put Ohio in the likely column, just because Ohio has shifted significantly towards the Republican Party recently. And Trump is doing good things for that part of the country based off of renegotiating NAFTA, getting out of TPP, a lot of expansion in jobs and such. Florida is an interesting case, but Biden is still the safe candidate. He's kind of Hillary 2.0 with more gaffes. So there is a chance that Biden bombs his campaign and significantly underperforms in the debates. It's much more plausible that happens than he overperforms in the debates and doesn't make any mistakes in terms of speaking. So let's go to Colorado, which I'm going to put in the likely column. Whoops, there we go. And Nevada, which I'm putting in the lean column. I think Nevada. I think the poll, whenever they poll Nevada, it tends to be a little bit more favorable to the Republicans than it should be, just because there is a large Latino population that is extremely hard to poll in Nevada. And unlike in Texas, there aren't a lot of groups that actually poll those groups heavily. Believe there's a Univision / Latino Decisions poll of Texas where they oversampled Latinos, but then weighted everything according to the census data, which means they have a more accurate sample of the Latino vote than they otherwise would. Meaning, at least in terms of their Latino margin of error, it's a lot lower than you would have otherwise. Weighing it based off of the census data, I think, is the wrong decision, especially as we approach election day. You should be using a model that's based off of weighing on expected turnout of the vote, whether or not you're using likely voters or registered voters, or even polls of all adults. But it's generally known that electorates are more white and they are older than the general population of the state, and that's still true even if you're using registered voters who are older and more white than the general population. That's why I prefer likely voter models and weighing based off of expected turnout. But yeah, so Arizona should be, I'm going to tilt that towards Trump. Arizona is changing, it is shifting towards the Democrats. But we'll see. But I still think that the Republicans have the slightest of edges in Arizona. And let's talk about the Northeast. Believe it or not, there's been a decent amount of polling indicating that New Hampshire might be a state that Trump could perform well in. Whether or not he actually invests in New Hampshire, which he probably will, and probably very heavily. We'll see if that actually matters. Right now, I'm going to tilt that to Biden because Biden should perform well up there. And, oops, wrong one. I meant to do Maine's 2nd district. I'm going to lean that to Trump, and Maine's at large I'm going to put as a lean towards Biden. Just because Maine is is kind of a weird state in some regards. but the rural areas of Maine probably still like Trump and don't regret their vote. So it really comes down to Wisconsin and Michigan. And I've been saying this for a while now, but Wisconsin is kind of like the Democrats' version of Virginia. Basically, it's a state that voted pretty solidly in their margin for most of the post Reagan era, and yet all of a sudden Republicans started winning Senate races, and then they started winning the House races in the state and took control of the state legislature and the state Supreme Court, and they have a majority of congressional districts now. And then they won the governor's race, and then a recall election of that governor. They only very narrowly lost the governor's mansion in 2018, and the race was somewhat nationalized, but Scott Walker still overperformed his polling, indicating that Republicans definitely have an advantage in the state. And of course, then they won the presidential election in Wisconsin in 2016. Whereas we saw something similar with Virginia, but in the, reverse, where you had Republicans controlling the state, all through 2000, 2004, but you saw Democrats winning more and more congressional districts. You saw Democrats win the Senate race, and then another Senate race, and then the governor's mansion, and they won the governor's mansion again. They flipped the state legislature. They flipped the state senate. And now it's pretty much universally recognized that it is a blue state almost. And I think Wisconsin is basically that, but in the other direction. So I'm going to put that in the lean Trump column, which, by the way, puts Trump at 270. I think Michigan, I think it was a bit too soon for it to vote for Trump. It was kind of just a perfect storm of everything. Hillary being a bad candidate, Trump having strength in Michigan and the upper Midwest. And there was also surprisingly low turnout or somewhat lower than expected turnout out of Wayne County, otherwise known as Detroit, possibly due to weather, So Michigan is kind of a true toss-up, so I'm kind of tilting that towards Biden. But Biden is probably what I would consider the Democrats' ceiling. And by the way, any state that is in the tilt or lean category is a state that could flip in the election. And I would even say there's an outside shot of anything in the likely column for both candidates. Some are much more likely than others. For example, I think Pennsylvania and Virginia are more likely to flip than Colorado and New Mexico. And I would say that Georgia and Texas are kind of in that Colorado and New Mexico category. I don't really see them flipping in this cycle, but, if the markets collapse, yeah, we're probably going to see a blowout. Of course, if the markets grow at a tremendous rate, say a couple hundred points a day through the election, or reach, I'd say, 30K for the Dow. And as long as consumer confidence, wage growth, and GDP growth continue to increase at the rate they have been throughout Trump's presidency, I don't think Trump will have too many problems being reelected. As Bill Clinton's campaign offices always stated, it's the economy, stupid. And it really is that. When people have more money in their pockets, they tend to vote with the incumbents, even if they disagree with certain things about them. It's just what it is. That's why, despite being scandal-ridden throughout his presidency, Bill Clinton was pretty popular because the economy did okay during his tenure. So that's kind of where I stand on it. Obviously, this is an extremely tight election, but Biden, like I said, I think is the ceiling for the Democrats. We'll talk about one other candidate. I was hoping to do a Bloomberg versus Trump election prediction, specifically a serious one, not an election night with, completely wild, randomized figures that made it basically impossible that Trump would lose. Um, I was probably going to have a slightly more moderate prediction, for example, but I still think that if Bloomberg had won the nomination, Virginia was a shoo-in for Trump, because out here where I live and in the rural counties and outside of the major urban population centers and even some of those and definitely in the suburbs, there's been a lot of pushback against Michael Bloomberg for his involvement in the state legislature, and of course the governor's mansion and the state senate. That was pretty much proven on Super Tuesday. Anyway, I want to thank all y'all for watching. As always, likes, comments, subscriptions really do help, and I'll see y'all next time. Take it easy. Have a nice day. Bye bye.